engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the Minot State Professional Communications Department proudly brings to you the Striha Sports Podcast with your host, Parker Striha. Hello, and welcome back to the Striha Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Parker Striha, and on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about one of the biggest trades in NFL history and what it means for both teams involved. I'm by no means a professional, but I do love talking about sports, so thank you for joining me. Before I get into this, I would like to thank KMSU for sponsoring my podcast and for allowing me to use this beautiful podcast studio that we have. Can't wait for the new building to be done so that I can get into the new podcast studio and take my podcast to bigger and better places. I would also like to thank Webb Western, that is W-E-B-B Western, for also sponsoring my podcast and my Parker Striha media brand as a whole. You can use code Parker Striha, that is PARKERSTRIHA at checkout to receive 10% off all purchases that you are making. Once again, that is Webb Western, and I would once again like to thank KMSU and Webb Western for sponsoring me. So jumping right into this, I'm going to be talking about the trade that happened last week for Aaron Rodgers being traded to the New York Jets from the Green Bay Packers. Now, I'm going to mainly focus on what this trade means for Green Bay, but I will give some time to the Jets to kind of talk about what it means for their roster and stuff like that, and what it means for their future going forward. But I just wanted to give myself about a week or so to kind of let the emotion settle down so I could come into this episode with a cool head, good thoughts, and I wouldn't be biased, so to say. I would have a clear head about all of this, and I could give a fair take on how I feel about the whole thing. So let's just jump right into it. The details of the Aaron Rodgers trade was the New York Jets received Aaron Rodgers, a 2023 first-round pick, which was number 15, and a 2023 fifth-round pick, which was number 170. And then the Green Bay Packers received a 2023 first-round pick, which was number 13, a 2023 second-round pick, which was number 42, a 2023 sixth-round pick, which was number 207, and a conditional 2024 second-round pick that will become a first-round pick if Aaron Rodgers plays 65% of the snaps. So kind of looking at this trade as a whole, really all it was, New York pretty much got, how do I want to look at this? Really all it was a first-round pick swap. So Green Bay pretty much, I'll kind of cancel out the sixth and fifth-round pick just because, they're just those late-round picks. So in reality, New York, all they really gave up was a second-round pick and what is most likely going to be a first-round pick for Aaron Rodgers. And when you kind of look at it like that, I don't think the trade is bad by any means. I know it was a very contentious subject in the media on what the actual value Green Bay was going to get. And I think if you're Green Bay, you're happy with this trade. You got to move up in the first round this year. You got an earlier second round pick to go along with the one you already had. And then, of course, you get the sixth-round pick, which, is whatever. You can still get some good players in the sixth round, but it's not as likely as the first couple rounds. And then my favorite part of this trade is that conditional 2024 second-round pick. I kind of figured they would get some form of a conditional pick, but this really just seems like the Jets wanted to give them a first-round pick without saying they're giving them a first-round pick. Because, unless he gets injured, which for his sake and for the Jets' sake, I hope doesn't happen. I don't want him getting hurt because I love watching Aaron Rodgers play. But if he doesn't get hurt, I don't think there's any way he doesn't play 65% of the snaps because there's no way the Jets are going to start Tim Boyle over him. They're not going to start Zach Wilson over him or anything like that. So, this is pretty much, in my opinion, a 2024 first-round pick, which if you're Green Bay, you want the Jets to suck as bad as they can because you could still be a decent team this year, which I'll kind of talk about in a little bit. But if the Jets are bad and Aaron Rodgers plays most of the snaps, you could have a top 10, top 15 pick when in reality the Jets are hoping this is a top or this is number 30, 31, 32, something like that. So, I mean, I think that's a great trade for Green Bay. Rodgers wasn't happy there anymore. You weren't happy with him and what his production was, and you just weren't happy with the whole situation. So you got rid of him. You got good value back, so I don't think there's really anything else you can say about that. The one thing, I was just shocked there were no players involved. I don't know a lot about like salary cap and stuff like that, and I don't know how financials would have worked out if a player like a Corey Davis or someone was involved in this trade. I don't know how that all would have worked for both teams' salary caps, but I was just shocked that there wasn't a single player involved in this trade, even someone like a Denzel Mims who isn't making a lot of money and isn't happy in New York. I could have seen him getting shipped off to Green Bay, but he doesn't. He gets, without question, the best quarterback he's ever played with now. So, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. So kind of moving on, what is next for the Green Bay Packers? The big thing is Jordan Love. They, as of the time I'm recording this, I believe it was yesterday, they signed him to a 1-year extension through, I believe, the 2024 season instead of picking up his 5th-year option. So they're not paying him a whole lot of money, but they are giving him these next 2 seasons. See what he has. They can see how he's developed, see how he's developing, and you can really see if he's your franchise guy. And if not, they're not paying him a whole lot of money. I think in this extension, it's like 1 year, $22 million or something with only 13 guaranteed. So it's not like they're not paying him big bucks. They're not paying him to be an MVP, but he could go out and he could shock the league. He could go out and be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and Green Bay would look like geniuses for pretty much paying him pennies on the dollar. But as a whole, I think this Green Bay team still has holes they need to fill, even after the draft. I don't know how I feel about their safety room, especially. I know they have a bunch of guys in the room, but I don't know if I trust any of them to be elite or good to even elite starters right now. Obviously, elite is a very high level to reach for any of these guys. I've heard a lot of good things about a rookie that I will be talking about a little bit further on in the episode, but I think they also still need receiver and tight end, even after drafting 3 receivers and 2 tight ends this year in the 2023 draft. But like I said, with safety, I'm going to get into positions a little bit more further in the episode, but I think they just need a little bit more help, even if it's just guys for the preseason or just training camp. Get more bodies in there, because competition is going to make everyone better. And that's just kind of how I see it. But Green Bay, it's a top-heavy NFC this year. It's been for the last couple years. You realistically could still be a top 4 or 5 seed in the NFC. Because, chances are you're not going to be better than the 49ers. You're not going to be better than the Eagles. And there's another NFC team that I know is good. Cowboys are probably up there also. But that's really the 3, I think, locks for the playoffs or for these elite NFC teams. I don't really trust any of the teams in the NFC South. I don't think any of them are going to be great. I think it'll be a repeat of last year, where the winner of the division is not going to have a good record. It's not going to be a great team. And I kind of feel the same way about the NFC West, other than the 49ers. I like the Seahawks, but I think the Seahawks have a very realistic chance to sneak into the playoffs again this year. But I'm also just not sure, because they're not going to win their division most likely. So they're just fighting for one of those wild card spots, which is difficult. Arizona, probably going to be extremely bad, going to be getting a top pick most likely. And the Rams are also going to be fighting for one of those top picks just because they are not a good roster. And then the NFC East, I kind of brought up the Cowboys and the Eagles. I think they're both shoo-ins for the playoffs, both really, really well-built teams, 2 of the best in the entire conference. And then the Commanders, bad. Giants just made the playoffs, but I don't know if I trust that roster as a whole right now. And then you get into the NFC North, which, in my opinion, this may sound biased, I don't like the division at all. I think as long as your team is not Chicago, you have a realistic chance of winning the division this year. I think the betting favorite right now is probably Detroit, just because they're an up-and-coming team. They've only gotten better this offseason, in my opinion. But they're also not unbeatable. They're not this elite team that I think is going to win 10, 11, 12 games this season. And I also just don't trust Jared Goff to be the quarterback I don't trust him to be the quarterback of a top-tier NFC team. I just don't think he's that good. That's why I was kind of shocked that they didn't take a guy like Will Levis or something who, well, yes, is probably looking more so to be a starter sooner than Hendon Hooker, who they took in the second round. They need a younger guy to come in there, and because you're not going to be paying Jared Goff high 20s, $30 million the next couple of years. So he's probably done with the Lions after this season or even next season, and they don't really have a solid plan at quarterback. And I don't know how I feel about the Vikings. I know they're still a talented roster, but I think they have a lot of holes on that roster that they need to figure out and get an answer to. Otherwise, I can realistically see them finishing third in this division. Obviously, it's really going to come down to Kirk Cousins, I think. I don't know what they're going to do with Dalvin Cook. I don't know how I feel about that receiving room outside of Justin Jefferson. They did draft Jordan Addison, but we got to see how the rookie acclimates to the NFL first before you can really make those judgments. And then Green Bay, I think with the weapons on their defense, there's no excuse for this defense to not be one of the best in the league. And with that, to not be one of the better teams in the entire conference, because they didn't lose a lot, I don't believe. I mean, Randall Cobb just signed with the Jets today, which whoop-de-doo, he wasn't going to come back to Green Bay anyways. But they really didn't lose a lot other than Aaron Rodgers and Bob Tonyan. But I think they got better, and I think I trust them more than I trust the other teams in the NFC North, because you're not a playoff contender or a legit Super Bowl contender most years for the past 30 or so and then just fall off a cliff even if you trade Aaron Rodgers. I think it's really going to come down to how Jordan Love plays, but I think he, after showing improvement over the last couple of years and sitting behind Aaron Rodgers for 3 years, I can realistically see Green Bay winning the NFC North or even just finishing second or third, but still being a legit playoff contender. Okay, so what is next for the New York Jets? This is a boom or bust move for them, in my opinion. Well, yes, Aaron Rodgers, I believe, has came out and said that this isn't just like a one-year thing or whatever. He plans on staying there for a couple years. Who knows if that's actually the case? He could get an injury or he could do something that he feels like he has to retire earlier than he'd like to. But this is a Super Bowl or bust move for the Jets because they really had no other options. Their roster is really good, really well-rounded in certain spots, in my opinion. But it's not going to be an easy push for the playoffs, because just looking at the quarterbacks in the AFC, you have Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes. The Chargers and Chiefs are probably going to be two playoff teams without question. Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. The AFC North, bit of a shootout, but those two teams could both realistically be playoff teams. Then you look at the AFC East. Tua and the Dolphins could be a playoff team. Josh Allen and the Bills will probably be one of the better teams in the entire league. Then you have Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, and then kind of moving around, you have Russell Wilson and the Broncos, Jimmy Garoppolo and the Raiders, and Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. That's 8, 9, 10 quarterbacks with legit teams that I think could make the playoffs. That means 3 of those guys have to miss out. And it could realistically be Aaron Rodgers and the Jets solely for the fact that Josh Allen is there. Tua and the Dolphins are an extremely good team. If the Jets slip up once or twice, they're third in their division and they're not in the playoffs, which, I mean, great for Green Bay, but then you as a GM and as a coach and everything who made that trade for Aaron Rodgers, you look stupid because you made that move with the intent or with the intention of making a deep playoff push and winning your first Super Bowl in like 60 years or however many years, almost, I think, 60 or 70, somewhere around there. You need him to come out and play like MVP Aaron Rodgers, or this trade is not going to look good for you this year. And kind of going off of that, it's a really, really tough AFC East. Josh Allen and the Bills. There is some stuff going around on that team that Some players may want out, like a Stephon Diggs, and they've been kind of wishy-washy. You can't really rely on them in the playoffs. But Josh Allen is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, legit MVP candidate, and that team is going to be making a push for the best team in the league and the best team in the conference, and especially the division. Then you go to Tua and the Dolphins. They have one of the fastest offenses in the league, and if your defense can't keep up, you're going to be put in a lot of bad positions. That's going to hurt your team. And they're another team that could legit make the case for best team in the AFC East and the AFC as a whole. Now, I don't trust the Patriots solely for the fact that they have, I believe, Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi and maybe some third guy as their quarterbacks. But that roster is still really, really good. And of course, you have Bill Belichick, one of the greatest coaches of all time, one of the greatest defensive minds of all time. His team could be 0-16, 0-17, whatever, and he's still going to make your team work like they're 16-0, like they are the best team in the league, and it's not going to be easy. And then just kind of a thing with the Jets is, what is Zach Wilson's future? Are you going to cut him? Are you going to trade him? Or are you going to hope that he can sit behind Aaron Rodgers for however long Rodgers decides to be in New York? And do you hope he can learn from him? And eventually, when Rodgers decides to leave, whether that's in 1 year, 2 year, 3, 4, however many years, that Zach Wilson can be an actual legit starting quarterback in the league, which he has not been good since coming into the league, and I believe 2021. And you need to see improvement. And I think if he is willing to sit behind a guy like Aaron Rodgers and quote unquote make his life hell in practice, or however that quote went, I'm sorry, Zach Wilson, you're not beating Aaron Rodgers out for the job. The second Aaron Rodgers became a Jet, you immediately had so much less credibility. You are already further down that depth chart than you think you are, because your leash is already incredibly short. But this could realistically be one of the best things that could have happened to Zach Wilson in his young career. Sitting behind a, without question, first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback and just see what he can do. Again, as we kind of get towards the end of this episode, I just wanted to highlight the 2023 draft picks that Green Bay had. They had, I believe, 11 or 13 picks total, but I'm not really going to go in depth on any of these picks because I'm not an analyst. I don't watch any film really other than the stuff I can find online. I'm not paying for any of that stuff right now, but it's going through pick 13. They got Lucas Van Ness, an edge rusher out of Iowa. Pick 42, Luke Musgrave, tight end out of Oregon State. Pick 50, Jaden Reed, wide receiver, Michigan State. Tucker Kraft at pick 78, a tight end out of South Dakota State. Pick 116 was Colby Wooden, a defensive lineman out of Auburn. Pick 149 was Sean Clifford, quarterback out of Penn State. Pick 159 was Dontavion Wicks, wide receiver out of Virginia. Pick 179 was Carl Brooks, a defensive lineman out of Bowling Green. Pick 207 was Anders Carlson, kicker out of Auburn. 232, Carrington Valentine, cornerback, Kentucky. 235 was Lou Nichols, running back out of Central Michigan. 242 was Anthony Johnson Jr., safety, Iowa State. And then 256 was Grant DuBose, wide receiver, Charlotte. Now, I think a lot of these guys are going to see legitimate playing time. Jaden Reed is probably immediately your wide receiver 3 and is probably your immediate starting slot receiver. Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, I believe, are going to be, I saw this online and I think it's extremely true. They have the potential to be Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, just minus, all the bad stuff that happened with Aaron Hernandez, which I won't really talk about. They have that potential. I think they're going to be great. Lucas Van Ness is going to see legit minutes and legit starting time with Rashawn Gary still being injured, and he's going to play a huge factor for Green Bay. And then the last kind of guy, Anders Carlson will probably be the starting kicker unless he does something really bad or just looks horrible, which probably means Mason Crosby has played his last game as a Green Bay Packer, which is pretty sad, but the time was coming anyways. And then I've heard a lot of stuff on Twitter that Anthony Johnson Jr., the safety out of Iowa State, could legitimately be Green Bay's starting safety come week 1. Like I said, not an analyst, don't know a lot about a lot of these guys, but could be interesting to watch. So my last thing before I end it off today is what I think Green Bay still needs to do. And the biggest thing I think is they just need to sign some veteran free agents, whether that's the guys that are just there during fall camp, during the off season, or they're just there during the preseason, or if these guys are there for the whole regular season or at least a couple games, I think they need to bring some older guys in there because this team is slowly getting younger, but get some older guys in there that can be role models, can be mentors for some of these younger guys. And I have a bunch of positions right here. I'm just going to kind of go through and just list some names at each of the positions I brought up for just guys that I think Green Bay should at least consider bringing in, even if it's, like I said, just for preseason, just for camp, stuff like that. So at quarterback, I have Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco. Wide receiver, I have Julio Jones, Jarvis Landry, and T.Y. Hilton. Tight end, I have Mercedes Lewis, Kyle Rudolph, and Cameron Brate. Safety is Adrian Amos, LaMarcus Joyner, and Chris Banjo. Cornerback, Casey Hayward, Jason Verrett, Kyle Fuller, and Ronald Darby. Edge rusher is Marcus Golden, Jason Pierre-Paul, and Justin Houston. Defensive line is Michael Brockers, Shelby Harris, and Hakeem Hicks. Now, I don't think any of these guys would be starters for Green Bay other than maybe Adrian Amos. And whether they would be on Green Bay's roster for a week, 2 weeks, a month, however long, I think the experience a lot of these guys could bring to Green Bay would be extremely valuable, especially for some of these younger position groups. And I think that would help set Green Bay up for success in the future. But if they're not going to go the route of signing veteran free agents, I think they need to try to trade for some disgruntled or misplaced cheaper young players. Just bring more talent into the team and hope these guys can turn a new leaf. I don't know if that's the saying or not, but see if the grass is greener on the other side, so to say. See if they can perform better in a new scenario or a new setting, or just perform better than they were at their old place. And I think that's really realistic. I don't know a lot of guys that would be on the trade block for Green Bay to try to get, but I think you got to at least explore that option if you are the Packers. But that is all I have for you guys today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you all next time. Peace.